Welcome to this, our session on the future of Christian higher education, a panel discussion. I'm John Cavadini. I teach here in the Department of Theology, and it's my privilege to be able to introduce our panel of speakers for this afternoon. And we'll proceed in the following way. I will introduce each speaker as their turn comes to speak, and each will make a short presentation, and after that, we'll have a discussion with questions from the floor, etc. Okay? I'm proud to be able to present and to welcome back to the Notre Dame campus as our first speaker, Charles J. Daugherty, who is president of Duquesne University. He is, however, well known to many of us on campus as an alum of this university, holder of both an MA and a PhD in the Department of Philosophy at the University of Notre Dame. Before serving as president of Duquesne, Professor Daugherty served as vice president for academic affairs at Creighton University, with one term as acting president. He was director of the Creighton Center for Health Policy and Ethics, as well as chair of the Department of Philosophy and a professor in that department. Somehow in the midst of all of these duties, he has found the time to write 6 books, all on issues at the intersection of philosophy, ethics, and healthcare. His most recent book, Back to Reform: Values, Markets, and the Healthcare System, was published by Oxford University Press. I'm sure you'll all join me in welcoming to the podium Professor Charles Daugherty.
Thank you, John, for the kind introduction. It is a pleasure to be back. The question is before us is the future of Christian higher education. I've spent all my life, including kindergarten, in Catholic higher education. So if I slip into that phrase instead of Christian, please forgive me. I realize where the net is wider. My assessment, in a word, is that the future is bright. But before I get to the argument for that, let me just state the case for why we should be concerned. I think United States society is drifting toward an amorphous spirituality and away from most of the mainline Christian churches that have built Christian higher ed. So to the extent that Americans feel less identification with those denominations, they may likely be less interested in the higher education those denominations offer. There was a strong push over the last generation, maybe over the last 2. I know this is true in Roman Catholic circles, towards secularization and away from the founding missions of our universities. Not, I believe, as an end in itself, but as the presumed means to improvements in academics, student life, and other administrative practices. Not to put too fine a point on it, I think the reasoning was we'd have to be less Catholic, less denominational if we were really going to be great universities. Christian higher ed is also private higher ed, and we are becoming very expensive, and that is a challenge for all of us. At the very same time, universities that I would say are at the second and third rung in the public sector have either improved dramatically or are perceived to have improved dramatically and have become real competitors for what was a quality niche that many of us had. The push for diversity is a challenge for us. On the one hand, diversity works well with Christian universalism. Our message is universal. Diversity should be no real challenge for us. We should welcome it. Yet, on the other hand, it can act to dilute the presence of Christians on our campus by our encouragement of the representation of others. And it can compromise, in some cases, the expression of our mission. I know when we at Duquesne consider public religious events, there's always a discussion whether it should be a mass or not. Because if it's a mass, many of our international students and other people who are not Catholic may feel alienated from that. The other argument, of course, if it's an interreligious, non-denominational prayer service, doesn't that say something about our own loss of a center? Many of us followed with some interest a few years ago. Georgetown University's spat about crucifixes and crosses in their classrooms and all the sides of those issues that arose. I think many of our Christian universities had a clear goal at the founding, and the pressure of events have changed those goals. It was quite plain in our case. There were Catholic immigrants working in the steel mills and in the coal mines who were being discriminated against in terms of higher education, and the Holy Ghost congregation came to Pittsburgh to offer education for that group. That's no longer our main target group, of course. The economy has changed. We used financial aid to support those families in the beginning. We use financial aid for many different things now, including encouraging the very best enrollments of our top scholars. On the other hand, there are needs of all of our universities for development, that is to raise money, and that can make us hostage to a whole range of demands from important donors who may have other agendas. There is, in many quarters, a resistance from faculty members to too much stress of mission. Many faculty members, I think, certainly early in their careers, identify more with their disciplinary peers than they do with the institutions that they're serving, and therefore want their institutions to be the same as the institutions of their disciplinary peers. And then I would say, in terms of the challenges, this is especially true in Roman Catholic circles, there are declining numbers of the religious in our founding organizations has created a challenge in leadership and has created some transition issues to lay leadership. So how can things be bright against that background? Here's the other side of it. I think now, and probably for the last 15 years, maybe more, there's been a counter-movement to that secularization on our campuses. And I think that there is a growing sensitivity among all constituencies at our universities that, however unclear this new content may be to us, that the religious mission is defining of our identity, and to lose it is to lose part of who we are. It's to lose a sense of self. I think even the more hard-bitten and cynical among us see that to lose that identity is to lose a market niche. It's to lose a reason for being economically. I think associated with this realization is the need to become more intentionally mission-oriented. That once was presumed, now must be deliberate. And I see this happening in a curriculum reform and in student activities and in concern about the culture on our campuses. I think the strategy that many of us are using of hiring for mission, which has become a phrase of art, is a hopeful sign that renewal of faculty will bring on to our campuses those who want to be with us because of who we are. My own experience when I was an academic vice president, we were committed to the interviewing, myself, the finalists for every faculty position in the university. 10 to 20 a year, multiplied by 3 finalists. So it was quite a commitment. Of course, I didn't know all the disciplines involved, but my question was, how do you see yourself contributing to a Catholic university? And it wasn't, are you a Catholic? I never asked that question. The question was, how do you see yourself fitting in and contributing to a Catholic university? A lot of ways to answer that, but red flags went up when some people couldn't or wouldn't answer it. I think there's a hunger for values in the United States, and I think our universities are part of the answer to that. I think we fill that need, we respond to that hunger. Our mission traditionally our mission emphasis traditionally on service is supportive of service learning at a very much deeper level than I think the conversation that's been going on for the last 5 or 10 years is. And of course on volunteering across the board. It's my experience now that students seem especially open to religious questions today. They may be open in a non-conventional way, but I think it gives us the possibility of attracting and educating mass numbers of students. One small snippet, when we had our 9/11 commemoration, we had 3 religious events in the morning, in the middle of the day, and in the evening. They were overwhelmed with students. Late in the afternoon, we had an academic event in which we had faculty members talking about what did 9/11 mean, what's the future between Islam and Christianity. Very poor turnout. So my sense is that the students regarded this event as visceral, not intellectual, and that it was part of their religious relationship to the issue. Certainly on the loss of the religious leadership in many of our institutions, Duquesne, for example, had its first lay president in 1988. I'm the second. St. Bonaventure, my undergraduate alma mater, first lay president in the 90s. Georgetown, first lay president last year. Dayton, first lay president this year. So this is a phenomenon in Catholic universities. And I think there's a lot of bumps in the road, but I think once it occurs, the alumni, the board, fall behind the new leaders, and I think these transitions are being made well. Finally, I'll end with this. In terms of the brightness of our future, I think those of us who are in Christian higher education, by the very nature of what we're committed to, have to believe that our work is aided by the Holy Spirit. And that, of course, is no guarantee of our success individually or collectively, but I think it's a guarantee that we have a role in providence no matter what direction it takes us. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Daugherty. I'm proud to be able to present as our second panelist, Dr. Robert B. Sloan, Jr., President and Chief Executive Officer of Baylor University. Dr. Sloan became the 12th president of Baylor University on June 1, 1995, leaving his position as founding dean of Baylor's George W. Truett Theological Seminary. Dr. Sloan holds a BA from Baylor and is a graduate of Princeton Theological Seminary, where he earned the Master of Divinity degree. He conducted post-baccalaureate research in church history at the University of Bristol, England from 1973 to 74, and earned the doctoral degree insigne cum laude from the University of Basel, Switzerland in 1978. Dr. Sloan joined the faculty of Baylor's Department of Religion in 1983. In 1990, he became the first holder of the George W. Truett Chair in Evangelism at Baylor and was appointed Dean of Truett Seminary shortly thereafter. Sloan has held positions as pastor or interim pastor of more than 20 churches in Texas, Oklahoma, New Jersey, and Germany. From 1991 to 92, he was president of the Southwest Commission on Religious Studies. He is a member of the Society of Biblical Literature, the Southwest Biblical Seminar, the Institute for Biblical Research, the National Association of Baptist Professors of Religion, and Studiorum Novi Testamenti Societas. He has authored 2 books, assisted with editing of several books, and published more than 50 articles and chapters in scholarly journals and other publications. I must add that Dr. Sloan was selected for induction in the Little League Hall of Excellence, along with Baltimore Orioles shortstop Cal Ripken, Jr. I'm sure you'll join me in welcoming to the podium Dr. Robert B. Sloan.
John, thank you very much. That was a nice introduction, and I knew when he paused there right at the end, he was going to say one of two things. He was either going to mention the Little League thing or that my wife and I have 7 children. And usually one of those gets a little reaction from people. So wonderful to be here with you where in an institution where I suppose having 7 children isn't all that remarkable. But in Baptist circles, that gets raised eyebrows. Good to be with you, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I understand that this is the third of conferences having to do with the culture of life, and that this third conference speaks to the issue of from death to life and asks specifically about agendas for reform vis-a-vis higher education and how we can, as within the world of higher education, bring life to our culture and or be agents of life through our students who act within our culture. Of course, it is a pleasure to be here, and in some small way, though there are many representatives of Baylor University here today, in some small way to represent the university on this particular occasion. I had the opportunity to be here, well, it's been 3 or 4 years now, to participate in a conference on faith and learning, and then, sad to say, well, there were several nice things that happened. The publication of the was it The Lack of the Irish, Ralph, that came out on that occasion from Ralph McInerney? I think I got the title right. And one of the biggest honors of my life, I should put that in my resume, is I've been mentioned in a Father Dowling mystery. That should go in. But Notre Dame, unfortunately for us, took care of us on the gridiron that same weekend. Our fortunes continue much the same, while I understand that Notre Dame's have taken a dramatic turn for the good lately. So congratulations in that regard. To provide some context about my remarks today, I want to say the following. And again, I want to speak to the question of, at least for me, an agenda within higher education that has taken place at Baylor that speaks to the question of life and how we hope to influence culture for the good. Our Board of Regents, some 36 individuals, passed almost a year ago this month a vision that we call Baylor 2012. It's a 10-year vision document that has proven to be, thus far, a very significant document of things that we're doing at the university. In one way, the central objective, one of the objectives of this 10-year vision statement, Baylor 2012, is rather modest. On the other hand, it's not modest at all. I'll read the following paragraph. Within the course of a decade, Baylor University intends to enter the top tier of American universities while strengthening and deepening its distinctive Christian mission. I hope you'll allow for the fact, of course, that 10-year vision statements do have to go on slick brochures, and one puts these out for various reasons. But I do want to say that our 10-year vision is not simply a matter of public relations or of fundraising. It is an effort at a rather comprehensive statement for our university in terms of the shape of our university, the direction that we want to go. It talks about assumptions, critical assumptions, and core convictions. It has, these are very theological in nature. It has some 12 imperatives, and then it has a list of specific projects. university, rightly positioned, can hope to impact contemporary culture and in so doing leave a lasting mark. A Christian university can influence culture, one, by educating students morally. This is a very basic calling and one that all Christian institutions of higher learning, be they comprehensive universities or small colleges, ought to be busy about. Secondly, preparing students, and I won't make the argument for the necessity of that. I think that should be obvious. I hope it is. Secondly, I think all Christian institutions can and should prepare students for leadership. The process of preparing students for leadership thus goes beyond merely setting examples of high moral character or even the processes of nurturing integrity and character, but leadership, though it works out of the reservoir of character and integrity, involves even a different set of habits and characteristics. Leadership involves, again, more than mere technical competence. It relies on the cultivation of habits of the heart that include integrity, courage, risk-taking, and wisdom. Now, both of these foregoing functions, that is, educating students morally and preparing students for leadership, should be shared by all true institutions, it seems to me, of Christian higher learning. Beyond those, though, I think there are two more ways of impacting culture that are legitimate provenance of institutions that also undertake serious research and the development of new knowledge. I have invoked of research scholarship. I do not do so in the with the connotation suggested in the perhaps perverse habits that many institutions of higher learning have developed, namely the publication of obscure articles as a metric for success. I'm referring to the idea found in Mark Noll's book, The Scandal of the Evangelical Mind. Quote, "In appealing for Christian scholarship, the point is not primarily academic respectability and certainly not the mindless pursuit of publication for its own sake that bedevils the modern university." And all of us know, this is not Noll here, but I'm speaking, reminds me of that Pauline expression in 1 Corinthians, not the Lord but I. The point is that there are many economic constraints and patterns that dictate what the modern research university is doing and the vicious cycle that they find themselves in. But Noll continues. The point is rather that the comprehensive reality of Christianity itself demands specifically Christian consideration of the world we inhabit. I think in that succinct phrase, Noll makes the case for the necessary work of discovery on the part of Christian institutions. And in so doing, I think that resonates with St. Paul's remark in 2 Corinthians that he seeks to take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. I think Christian consideration of the world then manifests itself in two other ways. I mentioned four ways that I think Christian institutions should seek to influence culture. So thirdly, this notion of a research activity and agenda suggests the following. Thirdly, that it is important for the Christian university to analyze and critique culture. The Christian university should be in the business of addressing the dominant paradigms and ideologies extant in contemporary society and providing analysis and critique of them. Much of what passes in modern society or postmodern society is reflective of no core principles whatsoever, indicative of no clear underlying worldview, or at least not a very coherent one. The Christian scholar has a role to play in calling a spade a spade. The Christian scholar has a role to play in holding the thoughts of colleagues in secular institutions, calling them to account for consistency and integrity, whether in philosophy, public policy, the arts, the professions, or any of a range of social domains. However, in addition to critiquing merely Christian cultural content, the Christian university should also be engaged in replacing poor content with good. That means that we need scholars capable of producing quality artistic and intellectual content to be submitted to the marketplace of ideas. This is the stuff of culture, the building blocks out of which our markets, our advertising, our arts, all of our daily interactions are built. Additionally, we need scholars who can produce thinkers of such a time. Our challenge at Baylor has been to transform our institution's culture from one that has exclusively specialized in the first two items I mentioned, namely educating students morally and preparing students for leadership. We have exclusively specialized in the first two, and it has been part of our agenda to seek to transform our own institutional culture into one that includes the second two, and to do so, and in so doing, to become a Christian university in, I think, a classic sense of that term. It has required a broadening of our understanding of our calling, and I think the 10-year vision, the development of it that I have referred to, is an exercise not only in excellence, but also in faithfulness. So now if I could, I'm not sure, are my time limits gone here? John, I haven't glanced at my watch. Let me mention a few specific things that we are doing that relate to this 10-year vision that I think suggest at least our agenda for influencing culture and bringing life, but also transforming our institution. Our 10-year vision has 12 imperatives, and it is, I won't mention all of them. You may be thankful for that. They have to do with endowment and athletics and facilities and so on. But let me mention a few things that do, I think, get at the core of the matters germane to us today. Our 10-year vision has as one of its imperatives the attempt to assure that our students and faculty interact in an environment conducive to learning and development. And for us, that means student-faculty ratios as one example. We have approached nearly 19-to-1 in our student-faculty ratios. We have as one of our goals to see that ratio go down to something in the 12s-to-1. That's a very costly thing for us to do. But we think that in so doing, we will cultivate a habits of teaching and learning, which will enable students to again develop the kinds of habits of leadership and critique and thinking that will stand them in good stead as they attempt to become the salt and light in the world. A second imperative, I must say, to accomplish that first imperative, that means hiring more faculty and bringing in fewer students. And we did both of those this year. It's a very costly thing to do. Secondly, another imperative is that we're working, and I must admit to having borrowed the thought here from a document of Notre Dame's that I read a number of years ago. We want to create a truly residential campus. That is in our history, but it is no longer in our present reality. I often, when I talk to our alumni about Baylor 2012, I often with envy refer to Notre Dame. And if what I'm about to say is not true, please don't correct me. It makes such a good story to tell. But I often tell people that my understanding is that an undergraduate for 4 or 5 years stays in the same dormitory. Is that still the case? I even make the point that the dormitories don't have to be that good, but it's no judgment on yours, but that it represents the building of tradition, it represents the building of relationships, and that when Notre Dame grads meet one another, they are not nearly as likely to ask what club did you belong to, what national fraternity or sorority did you belong to, as they are to ask what dorm did you live in. That says something, I think, about, or at least that works to create some of the things that I think are very important for a Christian institution. So we're making some dramatic efforts to change our culture in that regard, to recover a culture that we had. About, as I speak, about 25 or 30% of our students, essentially only freshmen, live on our campus. But by the end of our 10 years, we expect to see at least 50%, and my hope is that we won't stop until we have 70 or 80% of our students living in university-sponsored housing. And that's not just housing that we own, but housing that in terms of program, in terms of sponsorship, in terms of spiritual caretaking that we, in terms of leadership and community building and people skills, that we have the kind of housing that our students not only will enjoy living in, but will be nurtured by. That's, again, a very costly thing for us, but we're doing it. A third imperative calls upon us to build a world-class faculty, and I have to say again that someone from Notre Dame, let's see, we brought Father, someone help me here, Father Mark, no, who? No, I'm sorry, I'm just leaving me for the moment, but a former provost here at Notre Dame came, and it's before, who was before Nathan Hatch? It was Timothy O'Meara. It was Timothy O'Meara. He came, and he came to a faculty retreat, not a faculty retreat, but an executive council retreat, and we talked to him about faculty and the importance of faculty, and that was a point that became very clear to us, that we cannot have an outstanding university, nor can we have the kind of university that we envision without investing in faculty. And so that is something that we are doing with gusto. We are often told, well, you can't have academically excellent faculty and a Christian university. It just can't be done, and you have to compromise on your Christian identity. We have found precisely the opposite to be the case, that the more we are willing to tell people who we are, the more we are willing to be faithful to our own historic identity and to be upfront about that, the more attractive we are to scholars who share those commitments and who also have outstanding academic credentials. So we are in a golden age of faculty classes, and I've been able to say every year for the last 4 or 5 years that this is the most outstanding new faculty in the history of Baylor. Well, academic programs, some other things. I think I'll stop there. I had a couple of the things, but I know I've used my time up. But we think it's very important for us as an institution of higher learning to have both an environment and a curriculum that contributes to the lives of our students so that they may contribute life to our culture, and that we have the opportunity to be of enormous influence as an institution of higher learning. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Dr. Sloan. Finally, I am proud to be able to present our own president, Reverend Edward A. Malloy, CSC, President of the University of Notre Dame, known better on the home front as well as abroad simply as Monk. Father Malloy is in his third 5-year term as President of the University of Notre Dame, the university's 16th president. He was elected by the Board of Trustees in 1986 after having served 5 years as Vice President and Associate Provost. Monk holds an appointment as Professor in the Department of Theology, and I would like to point out, as his department chair, still teaches, conducting a seminar for first-year undergraduates each semester. His latest book, Monk's Reflections, follows 2 earlier influential studies on areas understudied at the time of writing, one on the ethics of policing and the other on issues of homosexuality and Christian ethics. He's also the author of more than 50 articles and book chapters in scholarly journals and other venues. An ethicist by training, he is a member of the Catholic Theological Society of America and the Society of Christian Ethics. Father Malloy holds a BA and an MA in English from the University of Notre Dame and an MA in Theology, a master's degree in Theology from the University of Notre Dame, which he earned while studying for the priesthood. He earned his doctorate in Christian ethics from Vanderbilt University in 1975, and Vanderbilt honored him in 1998 with the establishment of a chair in Catholic Studies in his name. He has also been awarded 12 honorary degrees. Father Malloy's service to higher education includes membership on the boards of Vanderbilt University and the universities of Portland and St. Thomas, leadership roles as chair of the American Council on Education, the Association of Governing Boards of Universities and Colleges, and participation on the Business Higher Education Forum, the General Council of the International Federation of Catholic Universities, and the board of the Association of Catholic Colleges and Universities. Monk also has played a leadership role in efforts to promote community service and combat substance abuse as, among other things, member of the National Advisory Council on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism and President Bush's Advisory Council on Drugs. He has served the Catholic Church on the Vatican Secretariat for Nonbelievers, the Ex Corde Ecclesiae and Bishops' Presidents Committees of the U.S. Catholic Conference, the World Congress of Catholic Education, and the Sister Thea Bowman Black Catholic Educational Foundation. And I out that he is also a recipient of the National Association of Basketball Coaches Balfour Anniversary Award, given to former varsity basketball players who have distinguished themselves in leadership and service. I'm sure you'll all join me in welcoming to the podium Father Monk Malloy.
The reason that John didn't think it was extraordinary to have 7 children is he had children himself. So it just seemed like the normal course of events. Also, I am also in a Father Dowling mystery. Maybe more than one, but at least one that I've read. Welcome to Notre Dame. Often my responsibility is to come to sessions like this and welcome those who've come from the outside and leave. I can't get away with that this time, but welcome. I hope you enjoy the campus. It's a beautiful place, we think, safe. You have 2 lakes to walk around, and if you can get away from the interaction among yourselves, I'm sure you'll find a lot of relief in the beauty of nature. Last night at Gannon College in Erie, Pennsylvania, I gave a 40-minute talk on the future of Catholic higher education, which I'm not going to give today. I would like to build a little bit on some of the things that the previous 2 speakers have touched and maybe take a slightly different direction so that in our conversation we can think about the full range of issues that need to be brought to the table for a full-blown reflection on this very important matter. I should say, first of all, that I am overall very optimistic and hopeful about the future of Christian education. My experience here at Notre Dame has been very rewarding for me to see the enthusiasm and the sense of commitment that can be pervasive in these kinds of institutions, not without fights, debates, disagreements, and occasionally acrimonious accusations. But I think on the whole, the people in this institution and many of the other Christian institutions that I've had a chance to visit are very proud of what has been achieved there, hopeful that we can build on that solid foundation, and also acutely aware of the difficulty of continuing and sustaining these institutions in the face of what is sometimes a hostile culture. Let me say, first of all, since the carrying force of these institutions is the faculty, not the administration and not the student body, it's extremely important for us who are the faculty members and how they get chosen from moment to moment and year to year. Notre Dame, unlike many of our Catholic university peer institutions, ask at the time of hire a self-described religious affiliation or none. That is a minimal kind of test, but the fact that it is not engaged in by many of our peer institutions suggests that they think these goals will be achieved by osmosis or by some kind of other principle of magnetism. My own experience is that these institutions will, not taking seriously the question of hiring and attracting committed Catholic faculty, end up resembling all of their peer institutions that have the same reward structure and level of prestige. There'll be nothing that will distinguish a Christian institution under Christian auspices and foundation from their peer institutions if the hiring of faculty who are committed to the mission and identity is not taken on in a vigorous fashion. One of the strategies that we've tried to employ in this regard is not only asking the question and trying to engage the goodwill and enthusiasm of the leadership of the departments and colleges and members of the A&P committees of the various groups, but also to try to entertain in the early stages of one's career a kind of familiarization with the campus as a whole, what makes it tick, to share something about the nature, how the mission and identity of the institution manifests itself day after day and week after week. So a lot of things have gone on. We've tried to prime ourselves for a more vigorous look at people who are hired. We've tried to make money available through the provost office for target of opportunity hiring, which includes the category of those who fit the religious mission and identity of the institution. And we've tried to do a better and more comprehensive job of initiating or welcoming people who will join the faculty community. I think this is an imperative that's not going to go away. It's of course debatable about what the pool looks like in a given discipline at a given moment. One of the worst dilemmas is to allow the identification of faculty to be hired to be so narrowed that, in a sense, there's only two people in the world that could ever fulfill the expectation. It's really important within a broad discipline to maintain maximum flexibility so that, in a very realistic way, a department can aspire to improve the quality of its productivity, its quality of its teaching, and so on, and still be faithful to the mission in its hiring process. So, my first thought, it's crucial, necessary to pay attention to the hiring of faculty who religiously fit the mission. I think I have a second obligation connected to that, those of us that are research universities, to prepare the faculty who will be available for these kinds of hires in the future. It's interesting that a school like Notre Dame, in addition to attracting Catholic graduate students, has attracted a lot of graduate students very interested in working in Christian institutions in the future. So one of the things that we are doing with some degree of deliberation is trying to take this building the pool question very seriously. There are some organized efforts to take that on at the national level. We've tried to participate in those in a very cooperative way. A second area of interest and concern has to do with the governing boards of these institutions. In a sense, all of my authority is derivative. I am elected by the Board of Trustees. I'm approved for continuation. All the officers are. Many of the fundamental decisions about priorities in these institutions are legally entrusted to the Board of Trustees. In 1967, Notre Dame took the initiative, along with a couple of other Catholic institutions, to move to a predominantly lay Board of Trustees, which has grown in size to a maximum of 60, but has within it a Board of Fellows, which is half clerical and half lay, and which has a special responsibility to pay attention to matters related to mission and identity. It's a protective mechanism. In fact, the Board of Trustees does the vast majority of work of governance and oversight function for the university, but I think it has served us very well. And in times of debate and controversy about matters related to identity, mission, and the future, the Board of Fellows, as well as the Board of Trustees, has stepped up and is very and deeply committed to assuring that we pass on to the next generation the most precious thing we have to offer, which is our distinctiveness. We cannot say often enough that the distinctiveness of an institution of higher education, presuming that it's compatible, in this case with Christian sense of calling, is our greatest strength. If you think about historically all-female institutions or military academies or liberal arts colleges or schools for the arts and so on, if they moved away from the things that were their hallmark, then there would be a great hullabaloo about how they were being unfaithful to their sense of mission. The seductive possibility with these kinds of institutions is that it happens by default. And so it's very important for us to, not only in our fundraising documents and in our appeal to our alumni, but also in the way that we try to relate to the rest of higher education and to the broader culture, to affirm constantly in appropriate ways, some symbolic and others simply part of the ordinary life of the institution, that we are a certain kind of institution, we're proud of it, and we're trying to let our planning for the future flow out of that identity. A third thing has to do with the way in which we organize our academic life. One, of course, has to do with curriculum. Our institution has a core curriculum for all of our undergraduate students. I think that has served us well. No matter what college the undergraduate students might study within, they all have a kind of, I hope, a solid basis that will provide a schooling in the broad, deep sense of the history of different disciplines and the cultures out of which we come, but also can remind us that hyper-specialization is often gained as a kind of enemy of breadth of knowledge, learning, and a capacity for lifetime involvement. The fact that we have, as a department, a great books program is very consistent with the kind of thing that we're trying to do for the student population as a whole. My predecessor, Father Ted Hesburgh, who was an extraordinary leader in higher education, one of the ways in which he tried, before he stepped down, to incorporate a sense of mission in terms of the curriculum and the academic priorities was to help establish a number of institutes and centers that were related very much to foundational questions like war and peace, like justice and the economic order, like civil and human rights, to try and look at issues like church-state relationships and all of those kinds of things, the circumstances of those who were unrepresented in the broader political process. These are the kind of things that any good university could take on, but they seem to have a particular fit and compatibility with the way we see ourselves as an academic institution. Another dimension of this has to do with student life. You were kind to say nice things about our residential tradition here at Notre Dame. I think it's a mistake for us to so emphasize that we underestimate the importance of what happens in the classroom and in the other learning environments, because that's why we exist. But it is, I believe, the case from my experience as a student, as a dorm mentor, as a sometime assistant rector and one time an acting rector, and now as a priest in residence in one of our male dorms, that this is where we take on the challenge of trying, in a sense, to deal with the whole person. The religious dimension, all of our chapels here, or all of our dorms have chapels and regular religious services. We have a beautiful basilica on the campus with both upstairs and downstairs worship opportunities. We try to very much focus on the quality of liturgical music with a great variety of forms, various kinds of programming under the auspices of our campus ministry and our Center for Social Concerns. I like to think that we keep trying to find the right mix between prayer, community building, and the kind of service that we feel called to render to the campus community, to the surrounding neighborhoods, and to the rest of the country and the world during break time, in the summers, and after graduation. I was very active in a group, Campus Compact, which is trying to promote the whole area of service learning at the national level. Many of the early members of that were religiously affiliated, but then it became, thankfully, much more pervasive. And the notion of service learning is, of course, not only to make a difference to have your senses touched by the reality of other people's lives, less fortunate than yourselves, or by other cultures, but also to bring the questions that are derived from that experience back into the classroom, to really transform the kind of conversation that goes on. To do that is wonderful, but to do it from a distinctively Christian frame of reference, and to do it with fundamental religious and theological questions being brought to the fore, seems to me to be what a full-blown and expansive notion of Christian education should look like. The last thing I would say is I think it makes a big difference who the leadership group is administratively in the institution, who the president is, who the officers are, and to what extent they are effective agents of mediation and of oversight and enthusiastic advocacy for the kind of sense of mission and identity that these institutions would like to convey. This institution has a restriction that the presidency is only open to a Holy Cross priest of the Indiana province, of the Congregation of Holy Cross. Sounds very restrictive. It clearly limits the pool. I believe that has served the institution well and will continue to serve the institution well. But it also means that we have an obligation and responsibility here to foster lay leadership. If not in the presidency role, in all the other roles, at least as would evolve over the course of time. I was involved a couple of months ago in a conversation that was subsidized by one of the foundations, in which we brought together a core group of Catholic leaders to talk about how Catholic institutions can prepare for the future that was described in terms of the number of institutions that have moved in the direction of having lay presidents and a higher percentage of lay leaders. I don't think there's anything inherently detrimental to the movement to lay leadership, insofar as we can foster a continuation, a healthy and solid and excellent continuation of the relationship to a diocese in the Catholic world or a founding religious community. I think that's all to the good. But it would be more realistic for all of us to recognize that the sense of continuity and history and kind of shared preparation that has been the hallmark of many of the religious communities is not so readily available to those entrusted with lay leadership in the same institutions. So we have to find organizational structures and preparatory frameworks by which that dimension can take place with greater degree of confidence. So, to sum up, I think there continue to be significant issues. None of this happens without forethought and articulation of goals and getting support from the right set of constituencies. There are always people suspicious in an institution like Notre Dame. They would sometimes equate preservation of the religious mission and identity with mediocrity in hiring or in promotion standards or in some other kind of way. I do not believe that that's the case. I like to think that Notre Dame has been at least one example that this set of complex issues and sometimes conflicting goals can be continually sought after in a way that it can be relatively harmonious and that can be a kind of model for the kind of world that I hope becomes more characteristic across the whole network of Christian educational institutions. So, great to have you here and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Father Malloy. Friends, the floor is now open for questions and discussion. You'll notice that we have 2 microphones set up, so if you have a question or a comment, please approach one of the microphones, and please identify yourself for those of us who don't know you. If you address your question or comment to one member of the panelists, I will give that person the first chance to reply, but we'll also ask the other panelists if they have a comment on the question. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Arthur Bowman, St. Paul, Minnesota. To President Sloan, Baylor wants to be a Tier 1 university. The question is, who decides if you're Tier 1, and why the credibility for that body to define who you are rather externally rather than internally?
Thank you. By Tier 1, I'm referring to the ranking system of the U.S. News and World Report. And it is the most widely used ranking system. We chose that one because we thought the Carnegie classification system did not have canons of or criteria that were as consistent with our own internal goals. For the U.S. News and World Report criteria have to do, it's a very student-oriented set of criteria, whereas the old Carnegie classification system, I say the old Carnegie classification system, emphasized federal research dollars and numbers of PhDs. But this one emphasizes student-faculty ratios. It emphasizes you get a bonus for classes under 20. You get a hickey for classes above 50. You have I thought you'd laugh. That word actually has an older history than what our young people think it does. You get it's the per student endowment, the per student operating budget, the number of alums who give, and so on. So it's a very student-oriented, I think, set of criteria, except for probably no doubt the largest domain, which is academic reputation, which is simply a survey done by peer institutions. Again, it is more important for us to be faithful to our own internal vision and identity than to achieve that ranking system. In all institutions, we annually say that we don't pay any attention to these and they're not important as we get the ink all over our thumbs looking through them, through the magazine. They are important because people look at them. And it is a way, albeit imperfect, it is a way for institutions to compare themselves with one another. And I think one of the ways that it's important for us, and thus and is consistent with our efforts at faithfulness, is that we are simply in the world, though not of the world. And it's important for us. I think it gains, you gain visibility. U.S. News and World Report, that particular issue, by far outsells every other issue that they publish. So it's looked at, it's read, and it in itself is a cultural influence with regard to higher education. Thank you, though.
Presidents Daugherty or Malloy?
Yeah, I would second most of that. I think it represents a kind of consumerism that we're faced with. It's on the one hand, it's a kind of accountability that's probably a good thing for us in the long run. On the other hand, it introduces criteria that are in many ways extraneous. I think the measures are important ones, but the final measure is the fit between that institution, that climate, that culture, that history, and the needs of an individual student, undergraduate, graduate, that family's expectations, etc. And none of those things are as easily measured as these polls. But it is a fact. It creates its own fact because it's a perception. And so, for better or for worse, I think this is what we live with for the near future.
Nobody wants to be a prisoner of such polls. We do constant benchmarking as an institution and also within our various units. We don't want to be complacent. I like the pressure that comes with seeing what top-tier, what people think of as top-tier institutions are taking on, and the kind of resource base that they've been able to attract, and make the case to potential benefactors that we're doing it a different way, but we'd like to think that we can do it with the same degree of excellence that others seem to see in the institutions that are in the top rank. We have had the good fortune of being in the top 20 in the university appraisal for a number of years now. If we dropped out of there, and for the right reasons, that wouldn't be any great problem. But the fact that we're there, I think, suggests to at least some people that it's possible to be faithful to your identity and mission and still be thought of by your peers in a general way as being an outstanding academic institution, and I think that's a good thing.
You were next, sir.
I think actually he was next.
You're next.
Thank you. I'm Jeff Senzig. I'm an undergraduate at St. Louis University. One of the central documents that these set of conferences has been based on is Evangelium Vitae, the Gospel of Life. To what extent, and I think we've heard this implicitly, and I guess I just want to hear this explicated, what do you see the role of the Christian university being in terms of evangelization and bringing the gospel, not only the gospel of life to the world, but also the fullest understanding of the human person through the life, death, and resurrection of Christ, and bringing that to the world. And that's open to all three.
I'll let you start.
Well, I think that we have to regard evangelization in a couple of ways. One is, I think our own Catholic students need attention on those matters. I mean, we don't think of it as the Catholic students have got it and now we've got to pass it on to others. I think that the depth of insight of some of our Catholic students requires constant attention on these matters, to have opportunities for them to discuss, deepen their faith, have opportunities for prayer, retreats, that kind of thing. So I see that as a field of evangelization. Sorry for that word. But I think when you're dealing with people in other faiths, other Christian traditions, Jews, Muslims, Hindus on our campus, that requires a very light touch. It's open, which is to say that all of our religious activities are available to them if they want. We have interfaith discussions. We have a one God, one world organization in which people of like-minded from different religious traditions meet on a regular basis to discuss these issues. But I think that at least our own tradition tells us that respect for other traditions is a very, very important groundwork in terms of the fundamental respect for one another as human beings. I don't think they're exclusive, but I think that, as I say, it's a gentle touch in those areas.
I don't know. It's like the word love, the word evangelization is awfully, you want to find another term just because it has a history and a kind of a reaction by different people. I think about 85% of our undergraduate students, just to start with that group, describe themselves as Catholic when they come. And that's been pretty steady through the years. So the vast majority of those who come here are self-described Catholics. We try, insofar as we can, to, in our dorm life and in our broader religious outreach, to serve that population as effectively as we can so that they have a chance to assimilate the depth and richness of their religious heritage and to celebrate it in worship and to deal with it in the classes in theology and in other disciplines in a more sophisticated way than they were able to do when they were younger. So I think we have a huge evangelization mission to those who come here as Catholic students. We also have an obligation to provide an opportunity for Protestant, Orthodox, and then other religious tradition students to participate in their religious heritage while they're with us, at least make that opportunity available for them off the campus or on, depending on the circumstances. The conversation that often goes on between students who are from different denominational backgrounds who are Christian, or Christians with those from other religious traditions, is an opportunity for people to speak from the heart and share the treasure that is theirs. What the result of that will be is a work of grace, presumably. And I don't know that we can ever gerrymander the outcome. But as a university, we want to be as respectful as we can. And of course, there is, with the religions of the book, a special historical relationship that also has to be appreciated. So we don't want to underplay the way we try to serve in an explicit way the vast majority of our students, and then not quite the same percentage in the other levels of students, but still a significant one. And then how we serve the rest of the students and those who come to us as searchers. I mean, I think there's more searchers out there than there are people that have explicit, strong religious feelings. And if you go to the Easter Vigil service at the Basilica, I don't know, we average somewhere like 15 to 30 people who either become full-fledged Catholic members who have other histories or who have no religious history and choose to be baptized. I think that's a pretty good sign that there is a kind of an evangelization going on, but none of this is required by anybody. And I think that reflects a little bit of the attitude of the institution.
As I understand evangelization, it involves this core of the gospel, which orients itself around the death and resurrection of Christ and the dissemination of that message such that others learn the message and when there is a work of grace, appropriate that and internalize it for themselves and become thus followers of Christ. I think that is very legitimate and necessary work of the church, and thus also of the Christian university, which is in a sense an arm of the church. I think it would be a mistake to understand that excuse me, that radiating core of the gospel and thus the task of evangelism as isolated, because it does, as I think you've heard the other two panelists suggest, it does radiate outward in terms of the fullness of life, and even in your question, in terms of what it means to be truly human, and I would say, and thus to live fully in the world. So there are behaviors which include research, for example, that are a legitimate expression of the faith and faithfulness of Jesus Christ. So my mind always drifts back to Paul on Mars Hill, preaching the gospel of Christ, but doing so in a way that has embraced the setting in which he finds himself. He quotes a pagan poet and a pagan philosopher, and yet enculturating that message does not completely lose that message, and thus touches and embraces all of life.
Friends, we have less than 5 minutes remaining in our session. Perhaps you've been waiting there so patiently. You have a brief last question.
Okay. My question is for all three panelists, but please excuse me, Dr. Sloan. I'm Catholic, and so I'll be phrasing the question in terms of Catholicism, but please feel free to answer in terms of your own tradition. Oh, by the way, I'm Tom Harmon from Gonzaga University. My concern is that it seems that within the curriculum of the university, of the Catholic University, it seems that all intellectual traditions are given the same weight, especially in the core curriculum. And so what results is that the student comes away without a sense of the coherence of the Catholic worldview. And I'm wondering if you can respond to that and maybe suggest if I'm in fact wrong about that, or what can be done better about that. Thanks.
One of the reasons that we have invested heavily, proportionately, in our philosophy and theology departments here is because we wanted to provide two strong disciplinary presences which are both incorporated in the core curriculum for our students, and to hire faculty who overall are both sympathetic and very competent and able articulators of connections between theological and religious positions and the world of learning in general. I'm not saying, I would never make the claim that every class that someone takes is necessarily of that kind, but in the end, every time you reform curriculum or demand certain courses of certain content, it's always a function of who's doing it, the people that are involved in the process. And my experience has been that these departments and others, which are critical in their own way, are giving our students tools to make discerning judgments about claims, about the various traditions of competence and so on. It's just the whole question of methodology or implicit theoretical positions in the world of higher learning which tend to poo-poo truth claims of one kind or another. It seems to me that in these kinds of universities, we have wonderful advocates, but also thoughtful people to discuss the relationship.
Now be a break until 3:15. Thank you.
Thank you. So anyway, I believe that having strong theology and philosophy departments as part of the core curriculum is a desirable and necessary step toward the goal of having a coherent curriculum.
Well, quickly, we make an effort, of course, to introduce elements of other traditions into our core curriculum, to globalize our curriculum, and to give people, a sense of that there are other ways of looking at things. But I would be surprised if anyone could look at our curriculum and characterize it that all traditions were treated equally. I mean, our theology department will be overwhelmingly Catholic theology. Our philosophy department is grounded in phenomenology. Most of our other traditions are very plainly Western, which is rooted in Christianity. So I would say we're making an effort to be more diverse, but not at the cost of a clear core of a world viewpoint.
I would just add, from the point of view of, I would call this a Christian university. I'm reminded of Father Newhouse's thesis that there is no such thing as a university pure and simple. And I agree strongly with that. There's not a university pure and simple, there's not a professor pure and simple, and there's not a curriculum pure and simple. And to assume that there is any neutrality would be a mistake. We have an intellectual tradition as Christian universities, and thus we should maintain those. Having said that, it is vital, of course, that that's not done in a overly restrictive sense. And one of the ways that I know we make sure that we have that we introduce the students broadly to embrace the world as an expression of our Christian identity is through a great text program. You mentioned your great text program. We have just instituted a great text program. It's not what I would call a University of Chicago style great text program, but it does incorporate, no doubt, many of the texts that would be in a kind of University of Chicago list. But it is it also has a canon. The shape of that canon is very important too. But that, I think, on the one hand, depending upon the shape of that canon of great texts, you can both privilege and make clear the tradition in which the university is located, and at the same time ask those universal questions that are part and parcel of the human experience.
Friends, before we disperse to continue our conversation more informally, we have one remaining obligation, and that's to thank our distinguished panelists.